Welcome to Inspired Caregiver with me, Michelle Magner. This is the podcast where people who are helping out their older family members come for information, tips, and inspiration on how to make their journey easier. Enjoy this episode of Inspired Caregiver. All right, well, welcome to Conversations with Caregivers. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Pam Moriarty. I am a supervisor for Adult Protective Services. We are part of the state of Nebraska's Department of Health and Human Services. What does Adult Protective Services do? Basically, we investigate allegations of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and self-neglect of vulnerable adults. Okay. That's basically it in a nutshell. I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't have any idea that we even exist, or if they know that we exist, they confuse us a lot with Child Protective Services, thinking that we do the same thing that they do, but really there's a lot of differences. But basically, in a nutshell, that is what we do: is we investigate those allegations that come into our hotline.
Who are making those calls to the hotline?
Lots of people. They really run the gamut. They could be family members, they may be caregivers, they may be doctors' offices, like I said, in-home caregivers. We also do investigations of facilities. So we do go in and investigate abuse and neglect that's occurring in nursing homes or in assisted livings. So it may be a staff member at the facility or a family member. I think that pretty much covers everybody.
That's quite a gambit.
Right.
So if I am really concerned about my mom, I guess when I hear APS, it feels a little intimidating. And if I'm really concerned about my family member living at home alone and I'm not liking what I'm seeing or something doesn't feel right, should I be reluctant to call you?
Absolutely not. First of all calls that are made to the hotline are confidential. I always recommend giving your information to the hotline worker, but by it being confidential, what that means is that when we go out and we're making contact with people, we're not saying, oh, this was called in by your daughter or, whoever.
Okay.
But it's always important to give that information so that we as investigators can get back in touch with you if we have further questions or, need more information. But no, absolutely don't be reluctant to call in. Some people will say, oh, well, I wasn't sure whether or not I should call. I didn't know if I had enough information. People give lots of reasons as to why they don't feel comfortable calling. I always say, just when in doubt, call. Even if you don't have enough information to say that there's abuse, neglect, exploitation occurring, we create a record so that if more things happen down the road and there's more information down the road that says that we should go out and do an investigation, we can look back and we can see that information that was called in earlier that wasn't accepted for investigation. Like I said, sometimes people think they don't have enough information. An example I always like to give is we got a report many years ago. So let me say, we work with all vulnerable adults. So it's not just the elderly. So we work with people with developmental disabilities as well. They're also can be vulnerable. But we had a report that a woman had called in. She was at a Walmart in a parking lot, and she observed a woman hitting a gentleman in the back seat of the van. She assumed, oh, it's probably somebody, a developmentally disabled individual, maybe a group home, day program, something like that. But all the information that she had was a Walmart parking lot, and she did write down the license plate number. And with that information, we were able to go out and locate exactly who this was. And she ended up being criminally prosecuted. So whatever information you have, great, get that information to us. But if you're worried about, like you said, your loved one who's living in their home by themselves, may not be able to really be living on their own anymore. We are not the enemy. We come in, we're here to help, basically. We have absolutely no legal authority to remove somebody from their home. So they think, oh, well, I'm just here to, you're just coming out here to rip me out of my home,
Right.
into a nursing home. We have absolutely no legal authority to do that. So we're here to help. We're here to connect you with resources. We're here to, we want to keep people in their home because that's where, really that's where they do the best. So if it's possible to keep somebody in their home, we want to keep them in their home. If they're not safe in their home, we're going to try to help connect with community resources, home health, whatever it is that we can to keep them in their home. If that's not safe, then we can work with trying to help connect with resources to get them someplace where they can be safe.
So what would be some examples of times when I would call you? Like if I know that my mom doesn't have electricity, and she just never has functioned in that with that amenity, is what would be some examples of times that it would be appropriate to call?
Well, first of all, like I said, we work with people who are vulnerable. So they would need to what is a vulnerable adult is somebody who has a substantial functional or a substantial cognitive impairment. So that's the first thing, is that we need to have somebody who really needs assistance with completing their ADLs, cannot live independently without assistance, or like I said, they have a substantial cognitive impairment where they're not able to make decisions on their own.
Okay.
So that would be the first thing. But really what we're looking at for self-neglect is an inability, due to that vulnerability, due to that impairment, an inability to meet their needs. So if she doesn't have electricity, that may not be that big of a deal as long as she has the ability to get regular food. Does she have a need for a refrigerator? Then that could be a problem. In the winter, not having electricity, that's going to be a problem. So my recommendation is always, when in doubt, if you have concerns, make a call. The hotline workers are going to ask you questions, trying to gather more information to determine whether or not it meets definition for us to go out and do an investigation. And they'll make that determination as to whether or not it's something that we should investigate.
So it sounds like there's safety and health issues, and then there's also just lifestyle choices.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've gone out to, we went out to a home where one of the main concerns was that this gentleman heats his home with a wood burning stove. That's the way he doesn't have a heater. He's always used a wood burning stove. So therefore his home is filled with ashes. It's dirty. You know what? As long as he's staying warm, I don't care. He can live however he wants to live, as long as his needs are being met.
Yeah, he's just off the grid.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's people that dream of that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's shocking to think that in the middle of Omaha that, that would be happening, but it does.
Yeah. So we are in the state of Nebraska. Are the regulations that you adhere to the same in every state, or do we have our own things? Because we have listeners in different states. Is it different state to state?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities state to state, but there are a lot of differences state to state as well. So yeah, every state does things differently. For CPS, for child welfare, there are federal standards for every state that they have to follow. For APS, there are no federal standards. So every state does it differently. Every state's laws are different. One of the biggest differences in Nebraska is that we have no statute for emotional abuse or emotional neglect. So people will call in reports often that, my brother is emotionally abusing my mother.
Mm,
You know, that's horrible. He shouldn't be doing it, but there's really nothing that we can do about that because there is no state statute for it.
okay.
And then what APS workers can actually do varies by state, and varies by statutes.
So really the goal is to just familiarize yourself with your own state's statutes and regulations, but know that you're available,
Exactly.
that people are available.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And who you call depends state by state. Like in Nebraska, we have a statewide hotline. So if you are calling in Scottsbluff or if you're calling in Omaha, you're calling the same number.
Okay.
Other states, they do it based on counties. So, they may be, if you're in one county, you have to call this number, and then another county, you have to call a different number. So yes, it's important to familiarize yourself with what it is in your state.
Okay. And I know that you attend many of the networking meetings in the Omaha area, and the goal there is so that you have awareness of what resources are available.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, comparing ourselves to CPS, since everybody knows what CPS is,
Right.
and not what APS is. When you talk about CPS, at least here in Nebraska, CPS has a ginormous budget. They have so much money that they can put towards making families safe.
Mhm.
APS, we don't have that budget. So what we're doing is, at least in Nebraska, we don't. What we are doing is we are connecting families with community resources. I don't have the money that I can just, pay for an in-home caregiver to be in the home 24 hours a day. So that is what we're doing by attending these networking meetings, is seeing, okay, what resources are out there in the community that we can recommend for families.
That's great. Well, I know you guys do an amazing job and are working really hard in the best interest of people that don't necessarily have a voice. So very grateful to you and your team for all that they do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I will get some information from you for the show notes, and just really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Pam.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.